in your experience, where has emotion sort of snuck in at the last minute or snuck in really quickly during a transaction?
So what's your opinion on like what's the most expensive mistake, an emotional mistake that like a buyer or a seller can make?
What's a real world example where you found buyer's emotion just killed the deal directly?
I mean, I feel like I have so many stories about this that we can't even fit them in this episode. Welcome to the T&T Real Estate Podcast, where we spark conversations that set you up for real estate success. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Tanya, and each week we bring you expert tips on navigating Northern Ontario's real estate market. Whether you're buying, selling, or investing, we've got the tools to help you thrive.
Welcome back to the T&T Real Estate Podcast. I'm Tanya, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Tyler. Tyler, we've missed you. You've been away a long time.
Yep.
Today, we're going to be talking about emotions in real estate. How are you dealing emotionally with your 8-day vacation that turned out to be like 2 weeks?
Yeah, so we finally got back on day 13. It was emotional to start. So we just wanted to go family vacation, get some sun. But we decided our 2 travel dates there and coming back were both like, I'm pretty sure the biggest snowstorms Toronto has seen in a decade. Mm-hmm. And so it was awful. It was awful, but we got there.
It was crazy because we were traveling on that exact same day. We were leaving on a Thursday, and we were both in Toronto at Pearson on different flights, and we were texting, and you were like, everything's running on time. And I was like, yeah, you know what? Everything's running on time for me too. This is crazy. Yep. Crazy snowstorm. So I got off. I took off. I'm sorry. Yeah. And you didn't.
I should have went to your destination.
Yeah, you should have. But plane was full.
Yeah. I mean, after, a week of lost luggage and lost strollers, we are almost whole. We're missing 1 stroller from Air Canada.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know. It might show up and it might not. Who knows?
And that was like a stroller that you'd gate checked, right?
Yeah.
Like you got up and put it at the gate.
Yeah.
And then
that's something that for the viewers, I thought when you gate check something, they kind of just put it in like a little closet close to the front where they could just like pull it out. Because as soon as you get off the plane, it's always there. Mm-hmm. But no, it's checked. And if you're delayed on the tarmac for 4 hours like we were and you go back, there are no more employees to get your strollers or your car seats or wheelchairs or anything, like nothing.
That's crazy.
It was a wild experience. It was a good 12 hours in Pearson, and I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, that's great. But your kids held up really well, right?
Oh my
God. I remember
God.
I texted you during our trip, and you said your son woke up and said he had a great day.
Yeah, we spent 12 hours in Pearson, on the phone, in lines, on an airplane for 4 hours, and he woke up the next morning and was like, that was so much fun. Let's do that again. I'm like, no, we're never hopefully doing that again, ever again. But
I think that's a good sign of parents really reining in their emotions, right? You were able to keep a brave face for the kids, have a good time, even though you're dealing with probably hours and hours on the phone trying to rebook your flights. Yeah. That's crazy.
I appreciate that. So
that's a good segue into our conversation today. So today we're going to be talking about emotions. People think that real estate is a very practical investment, a very practical transaction. It's about numbers, about dates, about people, financing, but it's not.
It never is.
It's always very emotional. Yep. So sometimes deals can unfortunately fall apart and things can maybe not come together because of the emotions. Right. So today we're going to talk about some real life scenarios, scenarios we've been in, names redacted, and maybe some scenarios that other agents that we know have been in that have maybe blown up a little bit because of emotions. Mm-hmm. So we think it's a financial decision made by obviously humans, but humans are emotional. Yep. What do you think, Tyler, in your experience, where has emotion sort of snuck in at the last minute or snuck in really quickly during a transaction?
I mean, like from the first time you set foot inside a listing with a client, like the emotions start automatically, even when you're pulling up to the house. Honestly, like the curb appeal is like, okay, like there's uncut grass or there's unshoveled pathways or whatever it is, like there's emotions all the way through. But I think the first point that emotions can make or break a transaction is when you're trying to figure out what you're going to write, and this is on the buyer side obviously, but what your offer is going to look like. So when you're educating your clients on what conditions are supposed to be in, what price, what deposit, they're like, well, if we're giving this, then we want, like if we're like, okay, like this price, say, I don't know if it's a $500,000 house, and we say, okay, we should offer $490 or $495, and they're like, well, we were thinking $475, but if we go up to $490, like you say, then I want the second fridge and all the couches and the furniture and the dressers and the bed and everything. So that's where number one comes in. And it's really hard to kind of look past that, especially when you're walking through a house and it's like, it no longer becomes, 4 walls and a kitchen and cabinets and upgrades. It becomes, I don't really like this paint color. And sometimes I just want to say, you know what, I'll pay you for your $100 for your 2 gallons of paint to paint this bedroom, and let's move forward, right?
Yeah. And it can be different too from buyers and sellers' perspective. We find, there's sort of different points that a buyer brings to the argument and the seller brings to the argument.
Right.
And sometimes for buyers, it can be sort of that fear of missing out, that panic that I need something, ASAP, I'm moving, relocating, or I want to end my lease. I just want to get into that home ownership. So they just start to get a little bit emotional in terms of the fear of missing out and maybe feeling a little bit rushed. And that's where sometimes I find buyers can sort of misstep if they're maybe feeling a little too rushed because, their friends are all doing it. Their parents own houses and they just feel like now has to be the time.
Right. And it's interesting, like on the seller side, it's interesting because obviously like it is such an emotional progression. It doesn't really matter how they're selling the house, if it's their house or an investment property, or it could be, like their parents' house that have just passed. Like it is an extremely emotional time. They could have raised kids in the house, but it starts as soon as that phone call comes in or your phone call goes out, and that first conversation is where they get to see you as an agent and how you're going to handle yourself and their transaction. So if you're nice and calm and they're a little bit more expressive and they're wound up, you need to kind of bring them back down, and you do that through obviously your communication skills and sitting down, talking to them, reassuring them, and helping them through the process.
That's a really great point. I think one of the big training elements that, we do at our brokerage is talking to our agents about how to communicate with their clients and how to ask the right questions to understand the perspective they're coming from. Because, it's not always about numbers or timing and contracts. It is sometimes about the reason why they're selling, sort of the pain points that they might have in the process, what they're afraid of, perhaps. Yep. Sometimes, especially we go through life changes, divorces, and that can be very unsettling for people. Right. And you as the agent, as their consultant, you're there to reassure them how the process is actually going to proceed, right? To sort of help them realize that there's a practical way of dealing with this transition, empathizing.
Right.
It's very, very hard to go through sometimes, whether you've lost somebody or you're going through one of those transitions. But at the same time, our job is to bring it down to, well, this is how we're going to move forward. Because we know you need to move forward, right? As long as, we know it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move a little bit onto the buyer side specifically, because that's where sort of panic can kind of build up pretty quickly. Where do you think, what's a real world example where you found buyer's emotions just killed a deal directly?
I mean, I feel like I have so many stories about this that we can't even fit them in this episode. Like it almost happens on a daily basis, but like some that I think of were, and I always like every time somebody's like, what's like the weirdest negotiation, is my chicken negotiation. And so there was a farm that I sold. I was representing the buyers. We sold it just east of the city, and they had, when we went and visited the property, there might have been like 30 chickens and a couple of roosters, mixed in. And I didn't know this moving in, but you need a certain amount of roosters per chicken or they won't, lay eggs or whatever it is. So they said, okay, we'll leave 5 chickens for you. We're going to take the rest. And I said, okay, sounds great. And so I bring that back to my buyers and they're like, well, we need a rooster. And I'm like, can't we just go get a rooster? Like I had no idea how this worked. I wasn't, totally out of.
Chickens really bonded to that rooster. Is it important to have the same one?
I was not sure. And then so we went back and forth for it was probably a couple days convincing, okay, we'll leave you a couple more chickens, but we're taking all of our roosters. We're like, no, we need a rooster. Clearly, you guys know this, and now I know this. So we ended up getting the deal done, but that was like the emotional side of, chickens and roosters was something that will come to the grave with me, because I will remember that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just the small items. I mean, maybe that's a bigger item as well, because it's imperative to the hens laying eggs. But like sometimes it's just really small things that buyers get hung up on. We had once, not me personally, but there was a story where the seller had not excluded this item in the listing, but then as negotiations went forward, they were like, we want to take the clothesline with us. And the buyers were like, no way, absolutely not.
We need that clothesline.
Take that clothesline.
You can't get crispy clothes without a clothesline.
Yeah, and it absolutely, I mean, how you could go buy them at Canadian Tire. It's so silly. But it was more, I think, about just the sort of animosity that kind of built up and the emotions that build up in that sort of discussing something silly like a clothesline. Yeah. And unfortunately, that deal did not work out.
Well, and I feel like as you get deeper and deeper into negotiation, these little things that kind of come up can make or break a deal. And it's not like, and I mean, we tell all of our clients and we tell, our agents, this is the way you should be doing things. Just like put everything on the listing. If they're not taking the little bar fridge, they should leave, but that's a whole other point. Like if they're not taking it, just tell them and don't let it come up after you. And lots of times people will call before an offer comes in. Sometimes they don't, and it's those offers that don't, which I mean, we should question the representation that for those offers. But if something comes in and they want everything in the house, all the appliances, and you specifically, when you listed the property, they said, no, we're going to take the washer and dryer because we paid $5,000 for it, whatever it is. You need to tell the buyers straight up, you're not getting the washer and dryer. And then that sets the example that, okay, when we put in an offer, they've already said, we're not giving you the washer and dryer, so let's not even try for it. Or if we do try for it, maybe we have to give a little bit extra money. So just having that expectation moving in, it's so off. It's the worst to backpedal from that mid negotiation and say, by the way,
we're going to take this tiny little thing out that you guys wanted, and then you realize it actually becomes a big thing for those. And that's where I think the professionalism of the agent, I think, is very important. We talk about asking your clients along the way, just making sure and checking in that everything is still going, appropriately. Buyers can kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole when it comes to maybe TikTok, doom scrolling and that type of thing, or getting their parents' opinions on things and what they should be asking for in an agreement. And it's our job as agents to sort of check in with our buyers and listen to if they're saying things like, oh, I heard this, from my dad, or heard this on TikTok, that this can become a big issue here. It's your job as the agent to listen and then bring them, the reality, like get the emotional side out of it. And what's the reality moving forward on this one item that they got a little bit maybe too hung up on.
Right. So what's your opinion on what's the most expensive mistake, an emotional mistake that like a buyer or a seller can make? Yeah,
I think for buyers, I think the best opportunities for buyers are things where you can add value eventually. And so when buyers get hung up on little things that are fixable, for example, let's say people don't like the idea of this, but sometimes you might get a mouse that comes into a house, right? A mouse or maybe two. Maybe there's a door that isn't closing properly. There's a bit of a gap at the bottom. There's usually a way for these mice to get in, and which can be fixed. Certainly you never want to buy something that's super infested with mice. That can be terrible. But if there's just one little, stray mouse has come in, and perhaps they're willing to take care of it, get an exterminator, plug up any holes. You can really deal with those things, but to sort of not buy a wonderful house and a good opportunity because of something like that, in my opinion, I think that can be a costly mistake.
Yeah. And I guess you see all sorts of scenarios. I remember showing a house. This was early in my career, but the house had a bidet. And they didn't want a bidet in the bathroom, so they didn't choose a house. But I'm like, this is a great deal. I'll come over and unscrew the bidet and put the shark bites on the plumbing, and we'll we'll live happily ever after. But no, they just couldn't look past that there was a bidet in the house, or like the leaky faucets, or I don't know if you see a rodent or something, but
small things that you can eventually fix, right? A couple $100 to fix the item.
Right.
I think that's sometimes the big mistake, is not buying the house because of the faucet,
the small things. Yeah.
The small things.
Yeah, I think back of our listing 2 years ago that we had a little bit of a bug problem because there was tenants there for a long time, and like that person that bought the house, and we did the legwork, we got the exterminator in, they like, it was on the way to being bug free, but the person that bought that house got a really good deal because they were able to look past the fact that there were bugs in the house previously. And you look, I mean, it really depends on the scenario, whether you're not going to bring kids into a house like that. But if you have time, if you can go live in an Airbnb while whatever's being done, and you're a little bit flexible, you can get a steal of a deal on a house.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So some sellers can be a little bit trickier to work with sometimes in terms of emotion,
right?
Especially people have been in the home for many, many years, or they've done very specific renovations that they are prideful about and they love. What do you find is one of the emotions that sellers kind of get a bit hung up on that can just completely kibosh a deal?
Just one emotion that can kibosh a deal? I could think of a whole bunch.
What are your top 5?
Yeah, I think the top emotion is just like the memories of the house and like the experiences that they've had in the house. I think in my experience, I see that more than, I put $100,000 into this renovation, and, this is my dream kitchen. And I think I see like, when you're out on the back deck with a client and they're like, yeah, this playground over here is where my kids used to climb. And, I mean, this has happened a couple times, but like, this was my parents' house and we moved in and we raised our kids, and just like the amount of, intellectual, emotional, just like stuff that is just stuck with them in the memories. And, what they see, the lamp on the table, and it reminds them of grandma from back in the day. I feel like that is just like, and they're like, okay, like if we sell this house, because it's most of the time, it could be a life change, or other things could have happened. Okay, if we're gonna sell this and we're gonna leave these memories here, then I want this amount of money. Whereas the house is probably worth this, which is still a good price. I mean, if they've held it for that long, but they get hung up on. Yeah. In their heads, I guess.
Yeah, on pricing. And sometimes it's like, if I had this kind of experience and this history in this home, I want this type of person to inhabit this home. And that can be a real problem, right? If someone says, I raised my family here and I want a family here, that unfortunately is it's not only going to deter a lot of people and potentially sell the house for less, but it's also, discriminatory against other people who have different sort of lifestyles. So I think that's important, and I think our job as agents and our agents in our office is really just to bring it back to, what is your goal here, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? Like, your goal is to move on. You need to move by this time. You need, this for this transition, whether you're relocating or, whether it's a family home. You have to bring it back to what ultimately is their goal and how are you going to achieve that? And, obviously taking account and listening and being considerate of what's very important to them, but also realizing that, you have a common goal here. You're working for them to move forward with the sale, not getting hung up on small details.
And I feel like that, like, even from, we're kind of talking about like the listing part of it, but even when you get into negotiations with a seller that is a little bit emotional, that's where, that is kind of where like the emotions that started from like the first meeting, and you got the listing going and like all of this stuff. And then when you flip that back and they finally get the offer and this is starting to get serious, like, okay, we might actually be selling houses, like when the emotions come back up. Yeah. And then lots of agents like to move quickly, and the, buyers want answers very quickly. But this is where, strategy could be like, okay, sit on this offer for 3 days, especially in a bit of a cooling market. Obviously it's a little bit different when there's, offers flying around and multiple offers, you have to move quicker. But when it's an emotional person, and this is something you can find out when you call the other agent, is, okay, keep this offer for a couple of days. If you want us to come and sit down, we're happy to do so. Like just experience, and like, you know, the buyer's letters and stuff like that. People are either really for it or really against it. But I mean, in these scenarios, you can explain who these people are, because often that gets lost in translation, especially with a weak agent, is, you know, they don't know who is bringing them the offer. So lots of times they don't even tell them, you know, what the names on the offer are. This is, okay, it comes in at this price and this is whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
I think that's one of the ways we should, as agents, take the emotion out of it. Like, honestly, I think we should take the names out of the offers. It should be, you know, Mr. Seller, you want to sell. This is the price they're offering. This is the market comps. This is where the market's at. And I think people should know. Honestly, I think we should take the names out. Take the names out entirely.
That's a hot take.
No letters, no nothing. Because then you're just like, oh, are these people like me? Are they different than me? And I think that can be a real problem. But also, some of the emotion is kind of based on what we've seen in the last few years in the past, right? Some of it is that pride. My neighbor got 10 offers 2 years ago. My neighbor sold for this. I know the house down the street over there is inferior. It sold for X. Yeah. And that's going to be a real problem moving forward as the market transitions. Certainly Sudbury, I mean, you know, we put a big caveat here. We're not like the rest of Ontario.
We're knocking on wood right now.
Yeah, we're not like the rest of Ontario. We don't have crazy months of inventory, and it's not turned into a buyer's market just yet. But we are seeing that shift, and we are seeing the shift to accurate pricing to where properties should be around their value. Yeah. And you're not getting 100K over ask because, you know, your neighbor did. So I think it's the agent's job to sort of bring that market data and that information to their client and say, look, 2 years ago was 2 years ago. That's not the market we're in today. Today, here's our, you know, 3 month or 6 month window of where things have moved. And I think it's maybe addressing that expectation right off the bat and saying, you know, I understand you may have seen this in the news. You may have seen your neighbor sell for X, but things have certainly changed.
Okay, so thanks for sticking with us through that little technical difficulty. We had a camera that I think has deceased. So, welcome.
Little technical reason.
Now you know that we're in the same studio. This is fantastic. So let's just start with kind of where we were going from this. But like, have you ever experienced, you know, you know what? What's the smallest little thing that always comes up during negotiation that can kill a deal or usually does kill a deal?
For negotiations, I think the small things are the chattels, usually. The chattels are, you know, furniture or appliances, that type of thing. Those are small ticket items that can become a big issue in the negotiating process. Right. But sometimes what happens is you agree on terms and you get a contract agreed upon, and then what happens, you have an inspection. Or maybe even sometimes a buyer might talk to somebody who says something that then changes their mindset in terms of what they should be paying for the property. Right. And that's the real problem with sort of the emotional side of things. If it's little things that come up in an inspection, little things that, you know, you could see when you visited the property and now you want a couple $1,000s off on the price because of it, that's an issue. That's an issue for most sellers.
I feel like we see that all the time, especially like in a town like Sudbury where it's a lot of blue collar and lots of people know, you know, how to fix things themselves or know somebody that does. I feel like that's a huge thing when, you know, I have clients that, you know, we'll get an accepted offer on something. They'll go to work. They'll be excited. They'll tell, you know, Joe that has 30 years experience in the mines. And they say, oh, I'm buying this house. And he had one time where he bought a house and there was an issue with a leaky faucet or whatever it was. That person will, you know, put all of that, you know, emotional distress on this one buyer. And we go through that house, especially during the inspection. They ask the inspector 14 different times, how's the plumbing? What's the issue? And then that just puts like a little negative thought in their mind to say, okay, this house is garbage.
Yeah, that seed of doubt that just keeps permeating and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think a good agent's job really is to bring it back and to say, okay, like what are we actually looking at here? Right. Whatever the case is, if it's an inspection issue, let's get a quote on it. Let's see, what does it actually cost to fix this? And ultimately, sometimes people are just trying to talk themselves out of it, right? And it's your job as the agent to understand, when are they just talking themselves out of it because they're just not ready? Right. It's maybe not the right house. It's not the right time in their life. Something has changed and they just don't want to go through with it. Right. So sometimes they're just making things up, not knowing that they're making things up. I don't think it's intentional, but they start thinking about things, and the ultimate plan is just to derail it.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you can see if it's intentional or not, like just, how the process goes and the conversations go and the communication. I like oftentimes, okay, these people are just not ready to buy a house. Mm-hmm. So you either have to realize at that point, okay, you need to pull back, you need to figure out, you can't fulfill your conditions, and you're gonna have to leave the deal and let them kind of cool off for a little bit.
And sometimes it's just about being calm in the moment. So instead of reacting to what your client's saying or what the neighbor says or what's come up, it's just being calm in the approach, and then just kind of reframing things and just finding out what's the real issue here.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So now moving on to investors. Investors think they are emotionless, right? Investors, it's all about the numbers. It's all about the cap rate, the ROI,
right,
the year-over-year returns, and the appreciation. But I don't think that's true. Do you think it's true?
Never. I mean, there are. I do have a couple of great clients that have been to Sudbury once, but they own multiple properties, and it's literally just about the numbers. If this makes sense, we always do an inspection. We have somebody come in, check out the property. If it's good, so the structure is good, numbers are good, we buy the property. Simple as that. But oftentimes, even like my out of towners that come up, they're like, okay, I listened to 4 podcasts and I don't have any emotions about this, and this was my first investment. And, I just want to see the numbers. I want a 10% cash on cash return, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, sure. So we walk through a couple of houses, some in bad areas, some in good areas. And they're like, okay, I don't want a bad area. I don't want a bad area.
I like that cap rate, but I don't like this neighborhood. So take that out. Yeah, that's good. I think, sometimes investors get so hung up on, like you said, podcasts and listening to what other people are doing. And they're like, they got 100 doors. I need to get 100 doors.
Yeah.
But they look at that number of doors and don't look at sort of what the actual return on the investment is.
Right. Yeah, 100 crappy doors is worse than 10 great doors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, even numbers aside, just headaches and all the things. Just keep your units quality, and forget about all the numbers. You don't have to go on TikTok and listen to these guys that have 2,000 doors that never see any of their properties. Just do what feels right to you, and what gets you.
Some of those properties probably coming on the market in the near future.
Right.
Some of them are a little bit over leveraged. I think some people have made the mistake emotionally of kind of getting invested in that sort of future potential. And I know sometimes people like to advertise, okay, our rents are here, but the potential rent is there.
Right.
And the investor sometimes doesn't realize, like, what is the time frame that it's going to take to get to that future potential rent or that future potential income, whether it's increasing your income, decreasing your expenses. Sometimes they get sort of hung up on that potential, but don't realize how long it's actually going to take to get there.
Yeah, I mean, the emotional part of it is very expensive when it comes to investing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, like, even there's a couple of properties on the market right now, they're bank sales, and it was a 6-unit. There might have been 1 tenanted unit in the property, I'm pretty sure, and there's 5 empty ones. And I sent it to a client. He goes, oh yeah, but there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm like, yeah, but you do $5,000 of work just to kind of pretty it up, put a tenant in there, and then you're cash flowing like crazy. And they just they can't see past it, and they don't get the property, and somebody else buys it, right? So it's just the emotion kills it.
It's hard, right? Sometimes people don't want to do those renovations,
right,
but it's our job as agents to kind of bring them to sort of the sense of, like, this is what it's going to cost to do those renovations, and help them make that decision. But some people ultimately just are not ready for it. Okay, so if emotion in a real estate transaction is inevitable, whether you're a buyer, seller, or an investor, how do you stop the emotion from getting in the way?
And obviously there's all sorts of different types of emotion, but I feel like there's a couple things that you can do, and you just need to know your numbers. You need to know when to walk away, what deal actually makes sense to what your strategy is. The other big thing is you have to know and trust your advisors, which is basically your realtor, your mortgage broker, your lawyer. If those, and I mean, especially throughout COVID, there was all sorts of investors coming up to Sudbury, and they would call me and be like, okay, send me listings. I'm ready to buy. And I'm like, okay, let's have a Zoom or a phone call and let's explain how the market works. And they're like, no, I've seen, YouTube videos and I'm good. And a friend of mine bought a house and he thinks it's good. And I'm like, okay, but let me educate you on what happens in Sudbury. Let's walk around, even do a map of the city. These are good areas. These are, less good, but maybe more cash flow. Like, you have to really look at who you're investing with, know your numbers, and trust those people that, that will carry you through the transaction.
Yeah. Listen to the advice of your advisors, right? Your realtor, your mortgage broker, and even your inspector can explain things in the inspection before maybe your uncle's looked at the inspection and makes his mind up.
Yeah. So what do you think a seller should decide on before they actually list the property that might help with the emotional side of it?
I mean, I think it's important for the seller to have a real frank and honest discussion with their realtor about their own expectations, right? Sometimes the seller won't sell below a certain price for whatever reason. Sometimes it's what they've invested in the property, or it's just not worth it to make that move. And I think that bottom line is very important to determine yourself and to also be honest with your realtor about, right? We're negotiating for you. It's not a secret what your bottom line is. I think that's a very important fact that you should share with your realtor. Certainly.
Your walkaway point for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes it's about timing more than money.
Right.
So if there's a certain timeline that's important to you, a certain part about the process, I think talking to your realtor about that and kind of what are your pain points? What are you scared about? Are you scared of in this process? And they'll help advise you on how to make it easier. They will ultimately want to make it a nice, smooth, simple transaction for you. I mean, selling your house is one of the most stressful parts of your life, right? And I think that's why it's important to have a realtor to sort of guide you through that. Yeah.
I think it's also important just to know that you have a realtor or a mortgage broker or a lawyer that are kind of on your side. And I could literally just talked about this, but especially when you're a seller, it's not always on the buyer side that it's important, but the seller side is just as important to be able to trust those three, especially people.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our lightning round questions. Tyler, most common emotional mistakes buyers make?
Walking away too early. And by that, can I is this
elaborate? Okay?
So by that I mean an inspection issue comes up, there's a missing plate on a plug-in, they walk away because the electrical is shot, instead of just asking the question. They always, that's my thing. That's not very. This is not very lightning round, but what's the most common emotional mistake sellers make?
I think pride. Just being prideful in the work renovations that you've done in your house. That can be. What's one sign someone is about to sabotage their own deal?
When they ghost you.
Oh no.
When they ghost you, when you're in the middle of a conversation or something and they're they need a second to think about it, which is fine, but it's okay, they're taking a little bit. Why is it taking 5 hours for them to get back to me? I'm
they're stewing. They're on TikTok.
Yeah,
they're watching videos.
They're talking to their coworkers about the electrical or plumbing or something.
Maybe they
that.
reference TikTok.
Yeah.
And then that's
I saw this. When they say I saw this on, then it's going down.
Yeah.
One sentence advice for staying calm in a hot moment.
Okay, I would probably just say, okay, let's take a moment. Let's breathe. Let's get back to what's our objective here. That's usually what I say to my clients.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, what's the best emotion to bring into a deal, if any?
Excitement.
Yeah.
Excitement. I think that's,
that.
I mean, you got to be excited, especially, your first investment property, your 20th investment property, that's super exciting. Your first house, your move up house, your downsize house, it's super exciting. Yeah. So keep the negative crap out of it. Keep the excitement into it.
I love that. That's so good. Okay. That's it. That's so positive. That's a very positive note to end on. Thank you so much for tuning into the T&T podcast, despite our technical difficulties. Yep. If you've enjoyed the podcast, if you know anybody who might benefit from the information that we're sharing here today, please do share. Thank you so much.
See you next week.